Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of To The Point podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. I'm hopping on today really just to talk about NFL free agency. It's only been a day, but already so much has happened with a lot of big names coming off the board. I'm going to kind of go through division by division what teams have been doing, some of the bigger names, and if we have any, breaking news over the course of this podcast this morning, I'll also bring that to your attention. So, might get into some of the action from the NHL world last night as well if we got time here. But there's a lot happening in the NFL world to touch on. So I'm going to start by talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFC South. They're obviously the reigning defending Super Bowl champions. Last week, Tom Brady took a quote unquote pay cut to lower his salary cap and open up cap room to keep players in Tampa Bay. And they had some notable free agents. Top of the list, Shaq Barrett, Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Brown, Leonard Fournette at running back, Lavonte David. And, Brady really in his elder years has become a de facto general manager. He's, called a lot of the shots in Tampa Bay. He got Antonio Brown to come. He got Gronk to come out of retirement. Leonard Fournette was a guy that was scooped up off the street that he kind of molded. So he's been a good general manager, a good executive of a team, and he's done it really efficiently. And by taking the pay cut, they got to keep the big fish. One of the biggest free agents available, he being the top three, the most impactful guys signed to date, is definitely Shaquille Barrett. Shaq Barrett last year in the regular season, he was a lackluster player, but he came out to play in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl, getting 2 sacks, getting 5 quarterback pressures, and getting 2 sacks on Aaron Rodgers in the NFC Championship game. This guy's a big name player. He leads the NFL in sacks over the past 2 seasons, and the guy's just a dog. And, the most important aspect of an NFL team is obviously quarterback. But right after quarterback, it's left tackle or elite pass rush. And we saw the Kansas City Chiefs did not have a good offensive line. Shaq Barrett's an elite pass rusher. It affected the game. Patrick Mahomes was running for his life, and they couldn't do anything about it. So keeping Shaq Barrett 4 years, $72 million, $36 million guaranteed. It's a lot of money, but he was going to get a lot of money. I think he could have got more money elsewhere. But he stated he wanted to stay in Tampa Bay. And in my experience, if you win a Super Bowl, you're going to make similar money to a team elsewhere. You're going to stay where you're comfortable. He played in Denver, won a Super Bowl there with Von Miller, then came to Tampa Bay, won a Super Bowl here, and I think he really enjoys it. We also have to remember there's no state tax in Florida. That's a huge part of why players want to go there. We see that in sports now more than ever with escrow and, salaries being cut with COVID and different things like that. So another big reason to stay in Tampa Bay for Shaquille Barrett. This is a big signing. They still got Devin White, an elite linebacker, still playing at the top of his game. A young guy who looks like he could be a stud for years to come. Lavonte David was re-signed last week. I still think one of the best cover linebackers in the NFL. He's 32 years old, but he brings it all. And then you got Barrett back there. You got Antoine Winfield Jr., who looked great playing out of Minnesota in his rookie season. So this defense is going to come back for the most part. Ndamukong Suh, still a free agent. I think he'll likely depart. But, to keep Barrett, to keep David, and I'll touch on who they got to keep on offense, it keeps this defense whole. Brady needs offensive weapons. That's a given. But over the course of Tom Brady's career, he's had top 10 defenses every time he's won a Super Bowl. And, at his advanced age, he's not the player that he used to be. Yes, he won the Super Bowl. He won the MVP last year, but is he a top 5 quarterback? To me, no, he isn't. Again, he's 40. He's going to be 44 come day one of the season next year. So having an elite defense to cover for him is necessary. And keeping Shaq Barrett keeps the opposing offenses off the field and gives Brady more time to put up points. So huge win for Jason Light, huge win for Tom Brady. Again, he can he can make the sacrifice with the money a lot easier than other people. And the reason I say that is, he's married to a supermodel who makes more money than he does. She's the breadwinner in the Brady household. So it's been reported she makes over $50 million a year, modeling and other things like that. So again, Brady is sacrificing money, but it's also, it's not charity here. He's not making $1 million and then his wife's making, $40,000, doing another job. So it's good to keep that in context as we move along here. But the Bucs weren't done. They kept adding. They re-signed Rob Gronkowski. I said that to Adam, that Gronk would only be playing with Tom Brady. It's the only quarterback he's played with over his career, other than a few snaps from Jimmy Garoppolo when Brady was suspended. But Gronk comes back 1 year, $10 million deal. His regular season last year, he really wasn't a huge target. They had O.J. Howard. They have Cameron Brate, who got more receptions than him. But we saw in the playoffs, Gronk had 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl, had 6 catches for 73 yards. I mean, this is what he brings at his advanced age. He's a big game player. Brady trusts him more than I think any other player he's played with over the course of his career. He's played with Randy Moss. He's played with Edelman. But Gronk's always been his guy. You get late into a game, he's going to throw it to Gronk when he needs a big play. So that's a great ad. And then, of course, they also did franchise tag Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin, the franchise tag looks even better now because they got to re-sign Shaq Barrett. Godwin he's a really good receiver. I'd say he's a number 2. Mike Evans is the number 1 there. But Godwin will play on the franchise tag. They can still, until July, they can work on getting a long-term deal done with Godwin. So I'm sure that's the hope for both sides. He was drafted by Tampa Bay. I'm sure he'd love to stay there longer term with this team. But if not, he'll make $15 million under the franchise tag. They still have Mike Evans. They have Gronk. I think they can bring back Antonio Brown. He didn't have the type of year that you're going to say, okay, a team's going to go give him even 10 million. Gronk's contract. I think he'll come back for $3 to $4 million to play in Tampa Bay, play with Brady. He won a Super Bowl there. He loves Tom. He only wanted to come back and play for Brady. So, looking at it, I think they might lose Ndamukong Suh, but of all their free agents, they're going to bring every other one back. And that's a humongous ad. Again, they still have a lot of their O-line intact with Ali Marpet and Ryan Jensen and, Jackson at left tackle, Donovan Smith. This team is going to look very similar to what it was last year. Again, we still have the draft where they're going to make some selections and things of that nature. But to start free agency in day one and to get Lavonte David back, Shaq Barrett, Gronk, Godwin, I think Antonio Brown, obviously Tom Brady, it's a huge win for Jason Light, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Bruce Arians, and everybody in tow. As of right now, I think them and the Chiefs are the favorites to repeat, get back to the Super Bowl. And, Light, Brady, they're doing everything they can to compete. And I give teams a ton of credit. When you have that window, go all in, do what you have to do. Brady took a pay cut. They knew Shaq Barrett was up. It was his time to make big money. They gave it to him. They didn't let him walk. I think we've seen teams get away with this. New England has allowed players to leave in the past, but I think they look at Shaq Barrett and say, this guy's at the peak of his career. Brady's got 2 years left. Maybe even if in years 3 and 4, Barrett's not the elite pass rusher he is right now, we'll win another Super Bowl in that window. And, Bob's your uncle. It's worth it for us. So, Buccaneers, huge kudos to them to start this free agency period. They needed to keep these guys. They want to win another Super Bowl. And when you go out and do that, you have to give the team credit because they're noticing and they're doing all that they can to get back to the big dance in LA next year. Then you have also in that division, you have the Saints. And, Sunday, Drew Brees came out, announces his retirement. I've been waiting for that for a while. It seemed like a long time coming. He'd been waiting, been beaten out by the Bucs in the playoffs, but finally he says it, I'm hanging him up. I'm done. And he retires. So obviously that opens up a void at quarterback. They have Taysom Hill under contract. Jameis Winston played there last year, only got a few snaps, but they've already addressed the situation. They gave Taysom Hill a restructured contract. He'll make about $10 million guaranteed this year. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. He made 4 starts at quarterback last year. We've seen him line up at wide receiver, tight end, fullback. So he's a guy that's going to bounce around, and maybe they give him a look at quarterback, but who knows? But then last night, they do re-sign Jameis Winston. Jameis was a starter in Tampa Bay for 4 seasons. He's one of 12 quarterbacks to ever throw for 5,000 yards in a season. But in that 5,000-yard passing season, he also threw 30 interceptions, 30 touchdowns. So pretty terrible year, going 7-9. However, I look at this, and it's going to be Winston, Taysom Hill battling for the starting job. I think it'll be a quarterback competition, which is never bad. Hill got 4 starts last year. I think we saw mixed reviews. I don't think you have any confidence that he's a starting quarterback that you can say, well, this guy's our guy for the next decade. I don't have that confidence. And at the same time, I don't have that confidence in Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, like I said, number 1 overall pick from Tampa Bay, had his problems coming into the NFL when it comes to rape allegations and sexual harassment. So he's always had a cloud over him. But in his play, he last year obviously didn't lead the league in turnovers, but the 2 previous years led the league in turnovers. And you're not going to win doing that. But if there's going to be a quarterback's coach / head coach, quarterback whisperer to turn it around, it's going to be Sean Payton. Sean Payton took Drew Brees when Drew Brees was leaving San Diego with a bum shoulder. The Miami Dolphins failed him at his physical there, and he looked like he was done. The Saints gave Drew Brees a look. He's going to turn into a first ballot Hall of Famer, leads the league all time in passing yards and completion percentage. And, he ultimately won a Super Bowl in 2009. Does that mean Jameis Winston's going to go win a Super Bowl? No. I'm just saying Sean Payton has worked with these projects before to try to turn careers around. And I think Jameis is a guy where he's got all the talent in the world. He's got a huge arm, better than Drew's. He does have some athletic ability. He's not a burner when it comes to running the ball, but he can scramble when he needs to. But he just needs to be smarter. Go to that check down pass when it's there. Don't risk it for the biscuit every play, because it's going to burn you. And for him, maybe sitting behind Drew last year, learning the system, for me, he's the starter. Taysom Hill got 4 starts. I didn't see anything where I'm so intrigued that Taysom Hill should be the quarterback of the future. To me, Jameis Winston's the guy. I don't see them adding a quarterback in the draft. I think you give Jameis the chance. He was a number 1 overall pick. He's got a ton of potential. And I don't know what he's going to do with the Saints, but you got Michael Thomas. You got Traquan Smith. I think they'll want to add a receiver in the draft. But you still have Alvin Kamara. And you're still in that Super Bowl-ish window. They're kind of in flux right now. You lose. They had to cut Emmanuel Sanders. They had to cut a few linemen again. Drew's retiring. But you got Kamara under contract. You got Thomas. It's time to win now for the Saints. And, they didn't do a lot other than the quarterback yet in free agency. They franchise tagged their starting free safety, Marcus Williams, who's been a really good player for them. But I think they're a team that could make some noise at the draft. Try to upgrade you got Jared Cook still at tight end. He's still very good. But, this team, you still got a couple years where you can take a look. I mean, you got the Bucs in your division. That's tough, to get out of that division. But you give them a chance. Carolina's in a rebuilding scenario. They don't look like a team that's going to be a threat. You have Atlanta, who finished 4-12 last year. So automatically you're second in this division. And can you make a push enough to give Tampa Bay a scare, at least get a wild card spot? And once you get into the playoffs, who knows what's going to happen? So that's kind of how I look at the situation right now. Jameis as your starting quarterback. You got Taysom Hill at backup, who you can still use at fullback, at receiver. You can throw him into gadget plays. You never want to eliminate that option. It's a different offensive package. Drew loved it, and I think Jameis will have to adopt it if he wants to be a quarterback there, because we know Sean Payton loves Taysom Hill, and I think he'll continue to use him going forward. And then looking, Atlanta has not made a move yet in free agency. They're going to be a team that's going to be interesting to watch come the draft. Do they trade up and get a quarterback? Maybe Trey Lance, maybe Justin Fields out of Ohio State. But they haven't made any moves in free agency. I don't think they'll be a really competitive team last year. They still have Matt Ryan under contract, but they're a team in flux. Going 4-12, their defense, they fired Dan Quinn, so they're in a new era in Atlanta. And then in Carolina, they hired Matt Rule last year. They had a mixed bag season. They have Teddy Bridgewater still under contract at quarterback. They're another team that's going to be intriguing come the draft. What do? Do they trade? They've been rumored to have been in the Desean Watson sweepstakes. Do they have enough pieces to acquire Desean? I have my doubts. I mean, they do have a high pick, so that would be intriguing for Houston. But they did make one move yesterday. They signed offensive tackle Pat Elflein. He was with Minnesota the past 6 seasons. He was cut last week by them for cap purposes. It's a minor move, but I don't expect them to do too much in free agency. Again, I think this team, the Carolina Panthers, the Atlanta Falcons, they're more teams that are going to be interesting come, late April in the draft. Do they move up and take a quarterback? What do they do? Can they make a move for Desean Watson between now and then? That's another intriguing thing. Desean Watson's not going to be traded this week, more than likely. So teams that add free agents, do those free agents become part of the Deshaun Watson deal? Yeah. The Houston Texans, if they decide to trade Deshaun Watson, they're going to want a good haul. And if you have a top pick in the top 10, that's obviously intriguing. But if you add a key free agent, if you got Carolina, I look at Carolina, I look at Atlanta, you look at the Jets, Miami. Do these teams go out in free agency? Because adding another elite player could intrigue Houston to say, well, okay, Miami, for instance, we'll take the number 3 overall pick. We'll take Tua Tagovailoa. We'll take a pass rusher that you got in free agency, and we'll take next year's 1. Is that enough to get Deshaun Watson? Maybe. If you can get 2 starting NFL players in the trade, it could be a pick for that Houston likes and a trade that they'd accept. So another angle to watch when it comes to Deshaun Watson, because again, he's still out there. There's still rumors that Russell Wilson, the Bears are gonna make a strong push for Deshaun Watson. They really want him. He would be instantly the best quarterback that franchise has ever had. And again, Jim McMahon won a Super Bowl in 85, but I think if you ask any NFL historian, that Bears defense was more. It was more about that Bears defense than it was about Jim McMahon and the offense. So interesting there. Moving to the AFC, and you get the AFC East. And last year, the AFC East was really a changing of the guard. We saw the Buffalo Bills win the division, have a really great season going 12-4. Josh Allen step up and emerge as one of the top 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL. And we saw the perennial powerhouse in the New England Patriots take a slide. Cam Newton was signed. Tom Brady departed. They had Dante Hightower, Patrick Chung, Brandon Bolden, 4 defensive starters opt out because of COVID, and they had a tough season. They went 7-9, but it really was a bad 7-9 season. Cam Newton only threw 8 touchdown passes. Julian Edelman was hurt most of the season. They had inconsistency at running back, and again, their defense was missing key players, and they missed the playoffs and went under 500. But this offseason, the New England Patriots have been the most active team, which is hard to believe. But they started it off with Cam Newton re-signing in New England. It made sense to me. He didn't have a lot of options. I think Bill Belichick in New England really liked him because he was a good leader. He took everything on the chin, and he was just a stable guy for them. He was not a negative presence. He came into the got there first, stayed there last type guy. and he was just a good locker room guy. And they rewarded him. His base salary is only $3 million. He can make up to 14 in incentives. So again, it's a cost certainty deal where he's not making a lot of money. If he plays well, he'll make more, but it still gives them flexibility to sign free agents like they have, or potentially make a move and acquire a different quarterback. But Cam Newton was just the tip of the iceberg because they made a lot of moves. And I'm going to start with Matthew Judon. Matthew Judon's an elite linebacker. He's playing for the Baltimore Ravens the past few years, and he was really one of the catalysts on defense. They had Earl Thomas for a while. They had Judon was there. They had Frank Clark, but Judon was a guy that was a game breaker, and Baltimore let him go. They didn't franchise tag him. They let him hit free agency, and because of cap problems and just probably not wanting to pay the player, they let him hit free agency, and he was one of the best players available. New England signs him. We're not used to seeing New England signing players to big contracts, but they did yesterday. Matthew Judon gets a 4-year, $56 million deal with $32 million guaranteed after the first 2 seasons. It's a big signing, but looking at it, it's a good one. Dante Hightower is supposed to come back after opting out due to COVID last year. So that'll get Judon on the left side, and then you got Dante Hightower playing in the middle. That safety position strong. And you get Patrick Chung back at his safety spot. I mean, you got linebackers galore on this team. They re-signed Dietrich Weiss, who was a really good defensive tackle for them. He's a guy who gets consistent pass rush. So again, defense is a struggle for them the past couple of years. They keep that. They still have Stephon Gilmore under contract for another year. He won Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. So with Matthew Judon, you're going to get pressure on the quarterback. New England didn't see that enough last year. The most consistent pressure they had were the game against the Jets. But that's not a good sign. You want to be able to compete against the top teams. And, Judon has played in big playoff games. He's played against Patrick Mahomes. He's played against really good players. And, Judon seems like a Bill Belichick guy. He's played for Harbaugh, who's a similar type coach. And he played in Baltimore, where in Baltimore, you can be yourself, but at the same time, you're playing under the Baltimore Shield with Ozzie Newsome and what they built there and their culture. And they don't, if you're a bad egg, you're usually gone. And I think same thing in New England. If you're not playing to the system, if you're not doing things the Patriot way, you're going to be looking for a job. And Judon kind of fits that description. It's a lot of money. And I'll touch on some players I think maybe got overpaid a little bit. But for me, I think it's a good signing because of just the fit. They're going to have good players back on defense. If you sign a really good defensive player and you put him with a bunch of nobodies, his quarterback pressures, his sack totals are going to go down because teams are going to double Judon. In this case, you got Hightower back. You have Chung. You have Dietrich Weiss. You have guys that are going to get to the quarterback. And Judon should get solo matchups where he can take advantage of inferior offensive linemen like he did in Baltimore. So I think this is a good signing for the Patriots. And they were done. They also signed Jalen Mills at corner, 4 years, $24 million. This was an okay signing for me. He's played in Philadelphia the last number of years. If you look at his statistics, they're not great. He was burned a lot in Philly. Their defense hasn't been great for a long time. But maybe Belichick sees him as like an Eric Rowe. Eric Rowe was a guy that he gave a flyer to coming from Philly. He didn't work out in Philly. He was okay in New England. But we'll see with Jalen Mills. He's definitely a guy Belichick, I think, sees as a guy he can turn his career around, make him a corner that he can trust. And he's done that in the past. So, it's Malcolm Butler was a guy that nobody knew about. Then he made a play in the Super Bowl, and he had some good years in New England, making it to a Pro Bowl. Could Jalen Mills be a Pro Bowl corner for this team just because, Bill Belichick works with him and, gets him into the right system and you got a good team around him. So that's a signing I don't love, but we'll see what happens down the road. Now to the offensive side of the football. New England has, they've always had good receivers, but not great receivers. Danny Amendola, not a great receiver. Julian Edelman, not a great receiver. The guy played quarterback at Kent State, turned into a wide receiver. Turned into a very good one, but I wouldn't call him elite. Brady had Randy Moss for a season and a half. But other than him, they've just had guys that you plug and play. And you look at it, they've had elite tight end play. They had Gronk, arguably the best tight end ever played the position. And when he retired, then Brady left, it was such a drop off. They had 11 catches last year from tight ends. 11. By far the lowest in the NFL. And tight ends are so valuable now because they're almost as athletic as wide receivers. You look at Kyle Pitts, who's in the draft coming out of Florida. The guy can do everything. He's 6'5", 260, but he can run past, safeties like a gazelle. Then you look at Travis Kelce, how valuable he is. George Kittle. I mean, tight ends are invaluable to teams because they give you a mismatch where even if you put a linebacker on a tight end, it's going to be tough for him to win that battle. And Belichick's loved his tight end, loved Gronk forever. Didn't have a guy last year that he even semi-trusted, and he addressed that in the first day and change of free agency. Yesterday, it was Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith's been playing in Tennessee for his whole career. He gets to free agency. I thought maybe they might franchise tag him. The guy's really good. He can block and he can catch. Is he Gronk? No, but he's a guy that Ryan Tannehill really liked. Is he going to burn you down the field? No, but Gronk wasn't a guy that was going to burn you down the field. This guy can win a 50-50 matchup. He can run the slant routes, and he can block for you. He can help in the blocking game, which is if you're a tight end in New England, you're going to block, and you're going to need to help in the running game. So Jonnu Smith checks off all those boxes. He gets a 4-year, $31.25 million a deal. That's fully guaranteed. It's $50 million total. But I think this is a great signing. You could say, well, they got Cam at quarterback, but Cam was playing with nobody last year. Again, 11 catches by tight ends. Cam always had Greg Olsen in Carolina. Greg Olsen was never going to beat you in a race, but Greg Olsen was one of the most sure-handed tight ends in the past decade. Devin Funchess was not a burner in Carolina with Cam Newton, but if you threw the ball in the air, he was going to go up and catch it. So I like some of these ads. Again, Jonnu Smith is a guy that I think Cam will love at tight end if he is, in fact, the quarterback. But Tennessee's going to miss him because he's a really valuable piece. And I think, Mike Vrabel, who used to, play under Belichick, loses his tight end and Belichick scoops him up. And I think that just tells you what Belichick thinks of Jonnu Smith because he was playing under a former player. Vrabel and Belichick have a high level of respect for each other, and he takes away one of his key assets. So great ad for the Patriots there. And then this morning, I didn't see this coming. You add Jonnu Smith at tight end, and you say, well, they got their tight end position locked up. But it's important to have depth, and if you could have one or two tight ends, you're even better set up. Patriots go out, sign Hunter Henry, the former tight end of the Los Angeles Chargers. He gets a 3-year, $37.5 million deal. 25 million guaranteed. Henry had his career. It looked like he was going to be the next great tight end. Then he blew out his ACL, missed a year and a little bit with another injury. So his career's been a little bit in flux in LA. But he's still a really good tight end. He can catch. He can run the route tree. He's another guy that can block for your team. But adding two tight ends is just as valuable for a New England system, Josh McDaniels, than having elite wide receivers because, when Brady was there, it was about having good tight end play, and Brady loved to throw to the Rex Burkheads, the James Whites, Even James Devlin, a fullback, was a guy who got targets. So Cam, we know his arm is not a lightning bolt, but Jonnu Smith and Henry are not guys who are going to run 50 yards down the field. So having those check down routes, which he really didn't have last year, could mean a big difference for Cam, or if it's Mac Jones out of Alabama, if they draft him, or if they could make a splash and trade for, say, Jimmy Garoppolo. I just think whoever is at quarterback is going to have a better chance at success because you're giving them really good pieces. When you have nobody to play with, you're going to look bad. And Cam, obviously, he looked bad last year. His arm didn't look good, but he's going to have better players to play with here. And you got to give Belichick credit for at least, addressing it and not just letting Cam come back, having another season where they go 7-9 or even worse, which I think they would have with the roster that they had. And, this is another thing where Belichick's spending money and he's clearly telling the team, he's showing himself that the team wasn't very good last year. And that's on him. He's the GM. He buys the groceries, so to speak. And in the first day of free agency, he bought a lot of groceries. And, I like you get 2 tight ends on a team that's built this way. I think it can be really successful. But they weren't done. They had 2 wide receivers. Nelson Aguilar. He was a guy in Philadelphia that was really a cast-off. He dropped a lot of passes. He had his problems with Carson Wentz. The coaching staff was growing frustrated with him because they would throw the deep ball and he'd drop open touchdowns. He went to Vegas last year and he had his best season yet. Playing with Derek Carr, he was a guy that they used as a deep ball guy. And he had over 800 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns, and he was a highly sought after guy. They get him for 2 years, $26 million. Then they also had Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne was a guy in San Francisco that was kind of a third down receiver. He was also a really good guy in the red zone, and he gets 3 years, $22.5 million. These guys aren't prototypical number 1 receivers. But New England, like I've mentioned, they've never had a prototypical number 1 receiver. They had Randy Moss. And after that, it was Gronk, and he was a tight end. But I think you look at Cam, if he is the quarterback, which that's all I can base it on right now. He's the guy that's on the roster. You give Cam more weapons. You give him more options. Aguilar can go deep. We'll see if Cam Newton can throw the deep ball. He couldn't do it last year. That remains to be seen. But Kendrick Bourne's a guy that's not going to fly down the field. You got Jonnu Smith. You got Hunter Henry. These guys are going to run 15-yard, 20-yard routes. I think Cam Newton can make that throw. So I credit Bill Belichick for at least giving this team a chance to win. Buffalo for 1 year was the powerhouse in this division. But I don't think he liked being third. Clearly, who does? You're only above the Jets. I mean, that's not an accomplishment. Miami took a step going 10-6. So, this division just became so much more interesting. You have the Bills, who still look great, and I'll touch on their additions in a minute. You have Miami, who took a big step, but that's only 1 year. There's still question marks with Tua Tagovailoa. What's he at the NFL and what can he do long term? And then you have the New England Patriots who are saying, hey, don't forget about us. And this division could become even more interesting if Desean Watson is traded to the Jets. It's rumored that's his number 1 preference. He'd like to go to play for the Jets. So, if you had Desean Watson, a revamped New England team, the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen and co., and, the Miami Dolphins, that could be a lot of fun to see down the stretch here. But, credit to Bill Belichick for not standing pat, for kind of breaking out of his comfort zone and spending a lot at free agency time, going after good players to add to a team that was really devoid of talent last year. So a big first day for Belichick. And like I said, Hunter Henry signing was this morning. So he's not done yet. The Buffalo Bills, again, they were a game away from the Super Bowl, losing to the Chiefs. But, they're a team, I think, that was really close. You had Cole Beasley injured at the end of the year. They acquired Stephon Diggs. I think running back is the need for them, but that's probably not going to be free agency potentially. Aaron Jones off the board. Chris Carson's available, the former Seattle running back. That would be an intriguing ad for the Buffalo Bills. But I could see them going in the draft, finding a guy. I think of maybe trading up a few picks, picking Najee Harris out of Alabama. I think he'd be a perfect fit in Buffalo. They need a good running back. Najee can catch the ball. He's a physical, thumping running back. He can run over DBs or linebackers for that matter. And I think he'd be the perfect guy. Singletary is not getting it done. He's not an every down back. So I think getting Najee Harris in the draft would be an intriguing ad for the Bills. But, they did make some moves. They added to their offensive line depth. They signed offensive tackle Darrell Williams. He was with Carolina the past 6-7 years. He gets $28.2 million, $14 million guaranteed. Good ad. And they made a couple of re-signings. They re-signed their offensive guard, John Feliciano. He's one of the elite right guards in football. Doesn't allow a lot of sacks, quarterback pressures, and critical for Josh Allen to keep him healthy and to keep him upright. And they also re-signed Matt Milano. Matt Milano is not a big name, but he's one of the best linebackers in the NFL, period. When he was playing, the Bills defense was ranked 4th in the NFL. He missed 6 games. The Bills defense went from 4th to 18th. That tells you all you need to know. He's just a presence. He's a burner. He flies all around the field. He led the team in tackles the past 2 seasons. He was an important guy to re-sign. They re-signed him before he hit free agency, which was imperative because if he hit free agency, I think he would have got bigger money. But Milano signs 4 years, $41.5 million, 21 guaranteed, and stays in Buffalo where Milano knows the system, he likes the team, and also pretty important, you get the opportunity to compete for a Super Bowl. So credit to the Bills for getting this done. But like I said, I think they have a late pick in the draft, and I don't know if Najee Harris will fall that far, but he's a guy that if I was them, I'd try to trade up, and that's going to be on draft day. If he's still available, say pick 23, 24, I'd use some draft capital, trade up, get Najee Harris, and I look at their team, and it's pretty damn close. I mean, they're a game away from the Super Bowl. If Josh Allen continues on this trajectory, they'll be able to compete with Kansas City next year for that spot in the big game. The Jets. The Jets are in an interesting spot. They have Sam Darnold he's still on the team as of now. They do have the number 2 pick in the draft. It's rumored in a lot of mock drafts they'll pick Zach Wilson, the quarterback out of BYU, potentially move Sam Darnold, maybe Atlanta, maybe San Francisco. Who knows where he goes, but that'll have to be a decision they make prior to the draft, more than likely. But they made some moves yesterday. They signed wide receiver Corey Davis. Corey Davis was a guy who played in Tennessee his first 6 years of his career. He's had his up and downs. He's had some injury problems. They drafted him to be a number 1 receiver. He's not a number 1 receiver. He's more of a number 2 or 3. I like him a lot in the slot myself, which is normally a spot for a number 3 receiver. But, Nelson Aguilar was a number 3 receiver in Philly. He went to Vegas, really became a strong number 2. So Corey Davis could definitely do that. They have Mims, who plays kind of their number 1 role right now for the Jets. He's a guy that is good, and I think Davis playing number 2 receiver for the money, $37.5 million. Not a bad deal for Corey Davis or the Jets for that matter. He's sure-handed, and when he does play, he's a strong receiver. So depending on the quarterback play and a bunch of other things, it could be a good addition for the Jets. They also signed defensive end Carl Lawson. He's been in Cincinnati his whole career, been a really consistent player. But they get him for 3 years, $45 million, $30 million guaranteed. And the thing is, with these teams that are quote unquote rebuilding, you still need to build a decent team. And you might not win a lot of games. Again, if you draft Zach Wilson, you trade Sam Darnold, I don't know how many games they're going to win because you're in a tough division like I was just going through, and you got a rookie quarterback. Justin Herbert was fantastic for the Chargers last year, but they went 5-11. So that just tells you you can have a strong rookie season at quarterback, but if the rest of your team doesn't come together, it's not going to be good. But the Jets, they do some things. They had Jarrad Davis from the Lions. He's a good linebacker, good veteran for this team. Again, probably doesn't have many years left in the NFL, but he's a guy that adds experience, adds that veteran leadership, and you're not going to see quitting from this team with the likes of Gerard Davis. This guy's a competitor. He brings it night in, night out. And I think that's an important philosophy for this team to have. For too many years, you've had the Jets as this sad sack franchise. The Buffalo Sabres, I correlate them to in the NHL. You can't have negativity and constantly saying, well, boo-hoo, the life's too tough on us. You need those guys that are going to bring you into the fight. Even if you have a 4-10 record, you got 2 games to go. You want to show some fight in these games. And I think a guy like Gerard Davis will do that for this Jets team. But, they're going to make some free agency moves. They seem to always do that. They added Le'Veon Bell when they didn't have an offensive line, which made no sense. But they do have Malachi Becton. He's really the most important player on their franchise right now. He plays left tackle. He's an elite player. They got to build the team from the offensive line out. They got Becton. They got a few other guys at the offensive line, which they're high on. Find your quarterback, whether that is Sam Darnold, whether you want to pick Zach Wilson. Make sure you protect him. We saw Cincinnati last year. They picked Joe Burrow number 1, but he got too many hits. They didn't draft. They didn't protect Joe Burrow. They didn't sign free agents. The worst thing you can do as a team is not address that now, and there's no excuse for it. So I would tell the Jets, you've made some good receiver, good defensive end addition, but make sure your offensive line is whole. So if it is Zach Wilson, if it is Sam Darnold, if it's Justin Fields, he is safe next year. He's going to take his hits. Every quarterback does. But you want to limit the damage that's inflicted on your franchise quarterback. Speaking of the Bengals, I mentioned Joe Burrow. He's recovering from ACL, MCL, ACL surgery. He might be back for training camp, but that's still kind of up in the air. But they made a big splash, and it wasn't an O-lineman, which is interesting. But they signed probably the second best pass rusher available, and that's Trey Hendrickson. I put Shaq Barrett 1, but Trey Hendrickson, he's 25 years old, playing in New Orleans, had an excellent season last year, but he gets a big deal. 4 years, $60 million, $22 million guaranteed in the first 2 years of signing. I like the deal, but I don't love the deal. And there's a couple of reasons why I don't. You lose Carl Lawson, who's a defensive end. He leaves. So that's another guy. Carlos Dunlap is no longer in Cincinnati. He's a free agent. Trey Hendrickson was great last year for the New Orleans Saints. But they also had Cam Jordan there. They had Okara. They had players that could get to the quarterback as well. And it makes it, they had Malcolm Brown. It makes it It makes it easier for pass rushers when you have really good players around you. Cincinnati really does have another elite pass rusher on the roster. So who's going to get the most attention? Trey Hendrickson. And when it comes to numbers, you got Cincinnati, who picked number 1 last year, picking Joe Burrow, like I said, but you add a big player to your cap, and it just screams of a guy who's really good, but he's a number 2. Cam Jordan is an elite pass rusher, and maybe Hendrickson will come out and show himself to be a really good player. But I see Hendrickson as a guy who's going to be looked at as overpaid, because if he gets 6 sacks next year in Cincinnati, you're going to look at the deal and say, well, what did he really give us? And, I'm going to say, I saw this coming, because he doesn't have the help that he did in the Big Easy. So I like Hendrickson as a player. Don't get me wrong. He's got when he gets off the ball, he's really fast. He's strong. He can get to the quarterback. But when I look at overall impact, I don't begrudge him for going to Cincinnati, because take the money. This is you hit free agency. This is your time to cash in. But as Cincinnati is the organization giving him the money, maybe they have a plan to add another pass rusher and really add to that. But they're not a team that loves to spend money. Again, it's during a pandemic. The Brown family they're cheap. And Hendrickson was a big ad. And, the worst thing that this franchise can do is not add pass rushers. Worse than that, do not address your offensive line, because it's one thing for Brandon Allen, the backup quarterback, to get hit. Who cares? You drafted Joe Burrow, number 1 out of LSU, to be your franchise for the next 10, 20 years. At the rate it's going, he won't be, because he's going to take too many hits. And it's not all because he's holding on to the ball too long. It's because he literally is running for his life half the games. So Hendrickson's been their only ad so far. I want to see if they add anybody in free agency at the offensive line position. And there's always the draft. And for Cincinnati, there's Penei Sewell out of Oregon. He looks like the best tackle available. I would consider trading up, or maybe he's going to fall in the draft with all the quarterbacks that are rumored to be taken. Penei Sewell is the pick for me for Cincinnati. Hopefully he drops in your lap. You can take him. But address the offensive line, because I don't want to see Joe Burrow's career get cut in half because the Bengals were too incompetent to sign really good offensive linemen. Penei Sewell's there. If he's there in the draft, if you need to trade up for him, take Penei Sewell. But we'll see what happens. Also in that division, Cleveland Browns, they get one of the best safeties available. They select John Johnson. He was playing it for the Los Angeles Rams the last number of years. He gets a 3-year, $33.75 million deal, $24 million guaranteed. You got Myles Garrett, you got John Johnson. Now you got really good Greedy Williams at corner. They got a strong defense. You got Baker Mayfield. You got a strong offense. I think this was a strong ad for Cleveland. There wasn't a ton of great safeties available. There is Earl Thomas, who didn't play in the NFL last year due to conduct detrimental to the team, being a cancer. But, I don't think anybody's going to touch him. John Johnson was one of the best available. If you don't want to address it in the draft, you want to get a veteran. I understand that, because I think Cleveland looks at their team and says, Pittsburgh's on the downslope. Baltimore's gettable right now. Cincinnati's still moving their way up. Cleveland believes they can win the AFC North next year. And I don't begrudge them for thinking that. I think they can win the AFC North. Again, is Baltimore a good team? Yes. But, Lamar Jackson, they need to add receivers. They haven't done that yet. Even their running, Gus Edwards and their running back position, I think could be improved, and that would make them exponentially better. J.K. Dobbins looked good, but I don't think he's an every down back. They let Mark Ingram go. So I look at Cleveland. You got Kareem Hunt. You got Nick Chubb. You got Baker Mayfield. What do they do with Odell Beckham Jr.? That's a big story still to come. Do they cut him outright? If they cut him outright, I think he goes to Tampa Bay and plays for low money. But that's another interesting option there. But I look at the Browns again. John Johnson's not going to jump off the page, and is he a game breaker? No. But I think the Cleveland Browns are in an interesting spot. They were in the AFC divisional round. They should have beat Kansas City when Chad Henne came in the game. And I think they can win the AFC North next year and really make a push towards being with the Buffaloes of the world, with Kansas City as an elite powerhouse in the AFC. So a good signing for Cleveland, and we'll see what they do in the draft and moving forward. Tennessee Titans had a tough day. You lose Corey Davis, you lose Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith was the bigger loss for me. But what they did do is they added to their defense. Bud Dupree, he played on the franchise tag last year, tore his ACL in week 12, but that didn't stop Tennessee from giving him a big chunk of money. 5 years, $85 million going to Bud Dupree with 35 guaranteed. This is a signing that's a desperate signing for me from the Tennessee Titans. They're a team on offense that I think is really good, but what they missed last year was a lead pass rusher. They signed Jadeveon Clowney, but the guy really hasn't been a really good NFL player. He went number 1 overall. He had injuries in college. They continued into the NFL, and he hasn't been a guy that's gotten to the quarterback. It's been a great run stopper, hasn't been a great pass rusher. So he's been a bust, quite frankly. But Bud Dupree is a really good player, but he's been playing alongside TJ Watt, and it's easier to get pressure. It's easier to get your sack totals up when you're playing with a defensive player of the year type guy in TJ Watt every year. As of now, Bud Dupree doesn't have a co-host. He doesn't have a guy that you can say, well, this guy is going to be a game breaker for us. This guy is going to help Bud Dupree get sacks because he's going to get a lot of attention. They signed, Denico Autry, who was a really good player for the Colts, 3 years, 21.5 million, 9.5 guaranteed, but he's not a guy that's going to get 12.5 sacks. It's going to get double teamed. I just look at Bud Dupree at linebacker. I think he's going to get doubled a lot, and it's still going to be a big question mark for Tennessee is the pass rush. And I think you look at ESPN, the headline will be, well, great signing, Bud Dupree. And I like the player a lot, but I look at their roster and I have to be fair to it and say, well, who's going to help him get pressures? The Aaron Donalds, even Khalil Mack last year, he was getting doubled. He didn't have a great season. People were saying Aaron Donald wasn't having a great year. And when it's your job to get to the quarterback, get quarterback pressures, when you're getting double, triple teamed, it's really hard and it gets frustrating. And Tennessee, I think they should have beat Baltimore in their playoff game last year, but the reason they didn't is because their defense. They didn't have consistent pressure the whole season. To win a division, they had the worst defense when it comes to statistical history of the NFL to ever win a division title. That tells you how bad it was. And in a division with the Indianapolis Colts, who continue to get better. And I still look at, I look at Tennessee. I like their roster a lot, but I look at the Colts and I say, Carson Wentz can find his game. That's a scary thought for Tennessee. What are they going to do to stay competitive? So interesting for sure to see what happens. Jacksonville is kind of rebuilding. They signed a few bit pieces yesterday in, Carlos Hyde and, a couple wide receivers that are kind of off the scrap heap, so to speak. But what does that division hold? Houston looks terrible. They still have the whole Desean Watson ordeal. So I think this is a 2-team race for the division title. But signing Bud Dupree is not a bad thing. I'm not saying that. But for the amount of money he's getting, I think the overall production could fall flat. And I worry about that long term for Tennessee. And that brings us to I think the two most important signings of the day, and these are for different reasons. And they're offensive linemen. So again, this is not going to be a sexy thing, but this is how you win Super Bowls. You get a quarterback, and when you get a quarterback, you draft offensive linemen so your quarterback doesn't blow his knee out like Joe Burrow. Kansas City Chiefs. If you watched Super Bowl last year, you saw their offensive line was not good enough. Yes, they had injuries. Mitchell Schwartz was out with a torn Achilles. They were missing another starter, but that's tough. There's injuries in sports. They cut 2 starting offensive linemen a couple of days ago. One's coming off back surgery. One's coming off torn Achilles. That's tough. Tough look in the organization for sure. But they get to free agency with cap room, and they sign one of the best offensive guard available, and that's Joe Tooney. He played New England the past 7-8 years. He played under the franchise tag last year. New England decided not to franchise tag him again. He signs in Kansas City for 5 years, $80 million, 32.5, fully guaranteed at signing. He is one of the best guards in football. He protected Brady. He did a great job protecting Cam last year, and he's just one of the best players available in free agency. And protecting Patrick Mahomes is how you win Super Bowls. So he has time to throw the ball. Joe Tooney is going to do that. One of the best guards in the NFL, period. And having Mahomes protected, giving Mahomes time to throw is the same as putting yourself in a better position to win the Super Bowl, which is effectively what the Chiefs did. They addressed the position that they needed to address, and they get one of the best players available. They spent a lot of money to do it, no doubt. But Mahomes tweeted out after a couple of smiley faces because he knows he's getting a guy who's going to work his ass off to protect him. And this gives Mahomes, the Chiefs, another great weapon, not an offense, but the offensive line to protect Mahomes, improve their running game. And when you protect your $500 million quarterback, that's the most important thing you do. So for Brett Veach, for Andy Reid, this was such a smart signing. And A lot of money, maybe at the back half, it doesn't look so good, but this team's in a window to win Super Bowls in the next 2 to 3 years. And Joe Tooney gives them the best chance to do that. Then I go to the Chargers. Chargers, they went 5-11, but they have Justin Herbert. You look at that division, the Raiders, good team, but still kind of in flux. The Chiefs, obviously a powerhouse. Denver, they still don't have a quarterback, so they're right. But the Chargers, you could say the Chargers could be the second best team in that division, battling with the Las Vegas Raiders. But what do? They swoop in and sign an all-pro center. Corey Linsley has been an all-pro 2 times in his career playing center for Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers has got to be fuming because he loses his center, who he has, he's the one who gives him the ball. He protects him. And the Chargers go out and sign Corey Linsley to a 5-year, $62.5 million contract, $26 million over the first 2 years. And it's an important signing for the Chargers, but I look at it so detrimental to Green Bay. Green Bay's in a Super Bowl window. Aaron Rodgers is going to be 37 years old, and you lose your starting center. It's devastating. You have so much confidence with Corey Linsley at center that you're not going to get blown up. You're going to be protected. And it just washes away because now you got to bring in a new guy, whether you draft him, whether it's a free agent, you got to learn that chemistry. But Linsley's still playing the best football of his career, and he walks out the door because Green Bay's too cheap to bring him back. And, Rodgers was pissed off when Jordan Love was drafted in the first round last year. They didn't go after a quarterback, a lineman, somebody to help him win. Well, this is another guy that they could have brought back to Green Bay that they just didn't. And I understand Rodgers' frustration because this is such a loss. It's called one of the biggest thing about offensive line is just being comfortable. And you lose a guy that you're used to having, it can affect the whole line. It could ruin it. And great signing by the Chargers. Justin Herbert is their future. He looked fantastic in his rookie season. So kudos to them for signing Corey Linsley. I think it's fantastic. But for Green Bay, who's in a Super Bowl window right now, I think if you're Aaron Rodgers, you just got to shake your head and continue to shake your head because every player that could help you leaves. They brought back Aaron Jones, so I'm sure he's happy about that. But then, the very next day you lose your all-pro center. That's a kick in the junk for Aaron Rodgers because there's probably nobody that he trusts more on the line than Corey Linsley. Before we wrap up today, just a couple other signings. Ryan Fitzpatrick, the backup quarterback for the Miami Dolphins, he is gone from Miami. He's going to the Washington football team, signing a 1-year, $12 million deal with incentives. He had a strong year in Miami, being a quasi starter, coming into games, starting the year as the starter. He's shown his leadership. He'll go to Washington. It'll be right now. It's him and Taylor Heineke under contract. Heineke hasn't played very much in the NFL. Washington screams the team to me that will draft a quarterback, even if it's not in the first round. Maybe second or third round, they look and find Kyle Trask out of Florida. They draft him and say, well, you got Fitzpatrick, you got Heineke, you're a third quarterback, go play scout team, learn under Fitzy. That's a potential fit there. But I said to Adam, I don't think Miami could bring him back. There's always Tua's looking behind him. And I think that's a sideshow from day one of camp. Is Fitzpatrick the starter? When are you going to put him in? So I'm sure he wasn't going to get that kind of money from Miami. And for him, this is his 9th different team. If he does start a game, it's an NFL record for the most teams ever started by a quarterback. So, good for Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's a good guy in the game. He's a guy that has earned this opportunity with Washington. If you can go start, you got the Cowboys there, you got the Giants, obviously the Eagles, but Fitzpatrick should be able to compete in that division with a really strong defense. Maybe he makes some noise. He's a guy that has really one good year, one bad year. He's played in the league a long time, but something to remember, he's a lovable guy, but he's never made the playoffs. So he's a good quarterback, but not a great quarterback. I think that's how you got to look at Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then, the Rams re-signed Leonard Floyd. This guy is a 12 and a half sacks last year, really good linebacker, a good guy to bring back. And for Stafford, for Aaron Donald, for the Rams team that has Super Bowl aspirations, he was a guy that was necessary to bring back so that you have a full complement of defensive players, you have a strong team, and you can compete with anybody for the Lombardi. So good signing there. But that was really day one of free agency. Houston made some small moves. Mark Ingram was brought in and a few guys, but nothing too notable. But those were the big names. Again, I think every signing looks great because it's a great player right off the bat. But the most important thing in free agency, and when it comes to, the first thing you look at is money. But the most important thing about free agency in any sport to me is fit. Does he fit? Just because, I think Bud Dupree can go to Tennessee. Maybe he won't have the impact. Does that make him a bad player? No. But maybe he won't be a great fit. I hope he is, but maybe he won't be. And that's the reason he doesn't have success. A player going somewhere and not working out, it's not always about the player so much. It's about the fit and how he fits into that system. I think that's something to remember as we go forward. And there's still some good players available. Alex Smith, does he get another contract somewhere? There's still Kenny Golladay on the board, Marcus Golden. So a lot of players still to be signed, still to figure out where these guys are going. So I'll keep you guys all up to date, but that's kind of day one of NFL free agency. Still a lot more to come here to the point. I'll be with Seamus tonight to talk about Sharper Objects, episodes 5 and 6. So until then, have a great day. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.